As I stepped off the plane, a rush of emotions engulfed me: relief, joy, and a bittersweet sense of nostalgia. After 3 long tours overseas, I was finally home. The weight of my service hung heavily on my shoulders. Each deployment had etched new stories into my soul, stories of camaraderie, bravery, and sacrifice. I had fought in distant lands, faced unimaginable challenges, and witnessed the cost of freedom firsthand. My heart swelled with pride as I thought of the flag that billowed in the wind, a symbol of everything I had defended. Returning to my small town felt like stepping back into a cherished memory. The familiar streets were lined with trees swaying gently in the afternoon breeze, their leaves shimmering under the sun. Yet, amidst the comfort of homecoming, an undercurrent of frustration began to brew as I made my way to my driveway. My trusty pickup truck, a loyal companion throughout my years of service, was parked proudly where I always left it, ready to whisk me away for errands and adventures. But just as I settled back into civilian life, the unexpected happened. The Homeowners Association, HOA, with its self-appointed guardians of neighborhood aesthetics, had deemed my truck an eyesore. They claimed it was too large and too old for their pristine vision of suburban tranquility. In one fell swoop, they decided that my vehicle, an emblem of my journey and sacrifices, was not welcome in their community. The shock was palpable as I watched them tow away what felt like a piece of me. How could they not understand the significance of that truck? It wasn't just metal and wheels. It was a testament to late-night missions and early morning briefings, a reminder of friends who hadn't made it back home. The towing felt like an affront not only to me but to all those who had served alongside me. In that moment, something shifted within me. I realized that I couldn't let this injustice stand unchallenged. My experiences on the battlefield taught me to fight against adversity, to stand up for what is right, even if it meant confronting an organization wielding power over our community. As news spread about the HOA's actions, I felt compelled to speak out. What they didn't know was that my story had already been told on major news networks across the country. They might have seen an old pickup truck, but I was more than just a vehicle. I was a nationally recognized war hero, returning home to a community that should have welcomed me with open arms instead of scorned me for my choice of vehicle. As I stepped into the familiar embrace of my hometown after years of service, the emotional weight of my experiences began to lift. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers, and the distant sound of children laughing echoed through the streets. It was as if the world had paused just for me, allowing me to savor every moment of my long-awaited return. The excitement surged within me, revitalizing my spirit after countless nights spent away from home. My family was waiting at the airport, their faces beaming with pride and love. As I approached them, my mother rushed forward with open arms, and I felt a wave of warmth rush over me. Her embrace was a comforting reminder of everything I had fought to protect. My father stood nearby, his eyes glistening with a mixture of pride and relief, while my siblings joined in, creating a cacophony of laughter and joyous chatter that enveloped me like a warm blanket. This was home. This was my sanctuary. Once we settled in the car, I couldn't help but notice how time had shifted while I was away. The town had changed subtly, with new shops sprouting up alongside familiar landmarks, but the essence remained the same. I marveled at the little things, the way the sun set over the horizon, casting a golden hue on everything it touched, or the sound of a nearby ice cream truck jingling its way through the neighborhood. Each detail reminded me of why I had fought so hard to uphold the values of freedom and community. As we drove through my neighborhood, I felt a surge of nostalgia wash over me. Familiar sights stirred memories: my old school, the park where I used to play, and even the corner store where I used to grab candy after school. It was all so vivid, yet there was an undercurrent of tension lurking just beneath the surface. Upon arriving home, my heart raced with anticipation as I envisioned the reunion with my loyal pickup truck, the vehicle that had accompanied me through thick and thin during my tour. However, that excitement quickly turned into confusion and anger as I discovered that my truck was no longer in its rightful place. The reality hit me hard. My pride and joy had been deemed unworthy by the Homeowners Association. At that moment, a knot formed in my stomach, a sharp contrast to the warm feelings I had just experienced. I thought about all that truck represented: late-night missions, early morning briefings, and friendships forged in battle. Though frustration threatened to cloud my homecoming, I took a deep breath and reminded myself of who I was, a veteran who had faced challenges head-on. My return should have been celebrated. Instead, it felt punctuated by an unexpected conflict that I would soon find myself compelled to address. The shock of finding my truck missing quickly morphed into confusion as I learned the reasoning behind the Homeowners Association's actions. I could hardly believe what I was hearing as a neighbor explained the situation, detailing the HOA's so-called rules governing the neighborhood aesthetics. To them, my trusted pickup, an enduring symbol of my journey and service, was deemed too large, too old, and undeniably an eyesore to their vision of suburban perfection. As I processed this, a wave of incredulity washed over me. My truck had been my companion through countless challenges. It carried not only tools and gear, but also memories of laughter and agony shared with fellow soldiers. The idea that it could be dismissed for its size, a workhorse built for utility, struck me as absurd. To them, it simply did not fit their ideal. Apparently, conformity had taken precedence over individuality and history. Even more bewildering was the claim regarding its age. While it might not have been the latest model adorned with glossy finishes and high-tech gadgets, each scratch and dent told a story of its own, of roads taken and barriers broken. In a time when people professed to value character over pristine appearances, their judgment felt like a betrayal, as if they were disregarding every hardship I faced on behalf of our country. Their focus on aesthetics brought to light a deeper concern that nagged at my conscience. What defined a community? Was it truly a uniformity in appearance? Or should it encompass inclusivity and respect for those who stood up to protect our freedoms? As I listened to more of my neighbors recount how the HOA had similarly targeted others for trivial violations, unapproved fencing, off-brand mailboxes, I realized this cultural obsession with cookie-cutter living came at a cost. The irony of the situation hit me hard. Here was a man who had stepped into harm's way and executed orders far beyond a typical civilian's experience, yet I was now being forced to justify the very existence of what represented my life's dedication. How could a governing body enforce such draconian measures, while completely disregarding the contributions of those who had served our nation? In that moment, I became acutely aware. I had no choice but to stand up against this injustice. The frustration ignited a fire within me. No longer would I watch from the sidelines as an organization wielded petty rules like weapons against community members. As news spread about the HOA's actions, I knew I needed to make my voice heard, not only for myself but for everyone else they sought to silence. It was time to bring their absurdity into the light. The moment I realized my truck was gone, a rush of emotions flooded over me: shock, confusion, and an overwhelming wave of frustration. After just stepping off the plane and embracing the warmth of home and family, this was the last thing I expected to encounter. I stood in front of my driveway, staring at the empty space where my truck used to be, feeling as if a part of my identity had been stripped away without warning. How could they do this to me? How could they treat someone who had sacrificed so much with such blatant disregard? Some fights are about more than just rules. They're about standing your ground, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Speaking of standing your ground, have you subscribed yet? Because if you haven't, you might be missing out on the best HOA takedowns on the internet. Now, back to the battle I was about to start. As the reality of the situation sank in, a sense of betrayal gnawed at my insides. My truck wasn't just a vehicle. It represented years of dedication to my country and countless memories forged during service. Each dent told a story: late-night missions, road trips with fellow soldiers, and moments of solace during difficult times. Yet here I was, being told by an organization that it was too old and too large for their pristine vision of suburban living. Their judgment felt petty and unjust, especially considering what I had experienced on their behalf. I soon learned that the HOA had decided that my pickup truck was an eyesore, unworthy of their community standards. The absurdity of their reasoning only amplified my anger. In a world that often celebrated individuality and character, how could they be so rigid in their perspective? It felt like an affront not only to me personally, but also to every veteran who had ever returned home after serving in challenging circumstances. Instead of being welcomed back as a hero, I was treated like an unwelcome guest who didn't fit into their narrow mold. My frustration bubbled over as I began to connect the dots between their actions and the broader implications for veterans in our community. It struck me that this wasn't merely about a truck. It was about respect for those who had defended our values. This HOA's enforcement felt like a slap in the face for anyone who had worn a uniform, a stark reminder that even in our own neighborhoods, we could be subjected to judgment based on superficial criteria. Determined not to let this disrespect stand unchallenged, I took a deep breath and steeled myself for what lay ahead. The incident lit a fire within me. I knew I couldn't remain silent while an organization wielded its authority in such an unjust manner. As I began to gather my thoughts and prepare for action, I understood that this fight would not just be mine alone. It would resonate with anyone who valued dignity and respect after serving our nation. It was time for me to reclaim not only my truck, but also my voice against an authority that had forgotten what it meant to support those who protect our freedoms. As I stood there, grappling with the absurdity of the situation, a fire ignited within me. It became increasingly clear that staying silent was not an option. The towing of my truck was not merely a personal affront. It was a reflection of a deeper issue that affected many veterans and perhaps even members of the community who felt marginalized by arbitrary rules. I had faced challenges in war and returned home only to confront a different kind of battle, a battle for dignity and respect. I decided to go public with my story. The thought of speaking out felt daunting, but I knew it was necessary. My experience as a war hero was intertwined with the principles of honor, respect, and service. Those values were being undermined not just by the HOA's actions, but by a culture that often overlooked the sacrifices made by veterans like myself. I had fought for the freedoms we all enjoyed, yet here I was being told that my truck, an emblem of my journey, was unwelcome in my own neighborhood. The decision to share my story on social media and with local news outlets was both empowering and terrifying. I crafted a message that conveyed not just my frustration, but also the broader implications of what the HOA's actions represented. Every word was infused with the weight of my experiences and the camaraderie I had shared with fellow soldiers. I wanted people to understand that this wasn't just about one truck. It was about respect for those who had served their country and an acknowledgement of the sacrifices made for community values. As my story began to circulate, the response was immediate and overwhelming. People reached out, sharing their own stories of feeling disrespected and sidelined by similar organizations. Veterans from across the country voiced their support, expressing solidarity with my fight against conformity and judgment. It became evident that this wasn't just my battle. It resonated with many who had felt the sting of arbitrary rules and regulations that ignored the human experience. I hoped that by bringing attention to this issue, I could inspire change. The more I spoke out, the clearer it became that communities should celebrate diversity and individuality instead of enforcing rigid standards that stifled expression. The outpouring of support encouraged me further, fueling my resolve to confront the HOA. I knew they would have to face the consequences of their actions, not just for me but for all those who had ever felt belittled or dismissed. As I prepared to take this fight to the next level, I understood that standing up for what is right often requires courage and determination. This wasn't just about reclaiming my truck, it was about reclaiming respect for veterans everywhere, a fight I was more than ready to take on. As my story gained traction, major news outlets began to pick it up, amplifying the reach of my message. It was surreal to see my face on television screens and hear my words echoed in the headlines. The juxtaposition of a veteran being disrespected by his own community over something as trivial as a truck struck a chord with many. News anchors and commentators highlighted the absurdity of the Homeowners Association's actions, questioning how an organization tasked with maintaining neighborhood aesthetics could ignore the sacrifices made by those who served our country. The media frenzy brought significant attention not only to my situation, but also to the broader implications for veterans everywhere. Interviews I conducted revealed that many felt marginalized by similar organizations, facing petty regulations that overlooked individual circumstances and contributions. The narratives shared by fellow veterans added depth to the conversation, painting a picture of a culture where those who had risked their lives were often met with indifference or outright disdain upon returning home. Public sentiment shifted dramatically as the story circulated. Many viewers expressed outrage at the HOA's behavior, rallying behind the idea that veterans deserve respect and acknowledgement for their service. Social media platforms exploded with support, hashtags like Respect Our Veterans trending as people shared their own experiences of feeling undervalued within their communities. This unified outcry served as a reminder that while conformity may be favored by some, it can never overshadow the fundamental human dignity owed to every individual, especially those who have given so much for others. Local business owners began reaching out to express support as well. One particular company stepped up by offering me a brand new truck, a gesture of goodwill that resonated deeply. Their action illustrated how community can come together in solidarity, contrasting sharply with the HOA's rigid enforcement of rules that disregarded personal stories and sacrifices. This outpouring of generosity further fueled my resolve. It showed that many people still valued character over conformity. As the media continued to cover the fallout from the HOA's decision, I watched as some board members were voted out in disgrace. The backlash against them was swift and unforgiving, revealing a community unwilling to tolerate such disrespect toward its veterans any longer. Residents began questioning not only the HOA's authority, but also their own role in allowing such arbitrary judgments to persist. In light of this newfound awareness, it became clear that my fight was about more than just reclaiming my truck. It was about igniting a movement that encouraged respect for all individuals, especially those who have sacrificed so much for our freedoms. The media reaction had amplified my voice, transforming a personal injustice into a rallying cry for dignity and recognition for veterans everywhere. It was time to continue this momentum and ensure that these discussions became part of a larger narrative about respect and community values moving forward. As the media coverage of my story surged, the outrage from residents became palpable. Neighbors who had previously remained silent began to express their discontent with the Homeowners Association's draconian policies and practices. Social media exploded with posts denouncing the HOA's actions, transforming the situation into a rallying point for community members fed up with the arbitrary enforcement of rules that disregarded personal circumstances. Local forums and community groups buzzed with conversation. People were sharing their experiences of similarly feeling marginalized by the HOA's stringent aesthetic regulations. Many felt compelled to come forward, recounting tales of unnecessary grievances faced for small infractions, dirty gutters, unapproved flower beds, and even complaints about children's toys left in yards. The wave of solidarity fueled a sense of unity among residents who recognized they shared a common adversary in an organization more interested in its authority than its community. Residents took action by organizing meetings to discuss how to address the HOA's behavior collectively. Petitions started circulating, demanding reforms within the association and calling for transparency in their decisions. The idea was echoed in coffee shops and at backyard barbecues. If they dared to mess with one veteran, they could do the same to anyone else. This awakening invigorated many, providing them with both a voice and a purpose. In response to this growing unrest, several passionate individuals stepped forward to lead a campaign advocating for inclusivity and mutual respect within the neighborhood. Almost overnight, lawn signs invoking support for veterans began popping up all around, each one reinforcing not only respect for service members, but also encouraging a return to community values rooted in compassion rather than compliance. The hashtag #SupportOurVeterans trended on local social media pages, resonating deeply as stories of mutual respect within families and friendship circles emerged. As public pressure mounted against the HOA, board members found themselves under scrutiny from both the media and disgruntled residents alike. It wasn't long before enough people rallied together to challenge those in power. Soon after, significant changes began unfolding. Board members responsible for towing my truck faced severe backlash, with many resigning or getting voted out amid accusations of disregard for community spirit and veterans' sacrifices. The HOA quickly realized they had stirred something much larger than they initially anticipated. Residents started withholding payment of their dues as a form of protest against unfair practices, resulting in financial repercussions for an organization that thrived on conformity over genuine human connection. Amid this upheaval, I felt a profound sense of hope, realizing that my fight was part of something much larger, a movement challenging norms and advocating for dignity across our community. United by a common cause, we were determined not just to stand up against petty regulations, but to foster an environment that truly celebrated individuality and respect for all its members. As I watched change unfold around me, I knew we were on the brink of redefining what it meant to be part of our small town, to embrace one another beyond superficial judgments and truly value each person's contribution. The turning point arrived quickly after the community's rallying cry reached its peak. The Homeowners Association, facing unparalleled public backlash, was left with no choice but to reverse their previous actions. In a hastily organized press conference, the HOA president stood before a throng of reporters and community members, visibly shaken as he addressed the situation. With cameras rolling and eyes watching, he offered a public apology for the towing of my truck, admitting that their decision had been both misguided and disrespectful. "We failed to uphold the values of this community," he stated somberly. "We acknowledge the sacrifices made by our veterans and regret that our actions did not reflect the respect they deserve." The words felt like a needed balm, but they also highlighted the stark disconnect between those who governed and those who lived within our community. It was a powerful moment, one that symbolized not just an apology, but also a growing awareness among residents about what it meant to honor those who had served. Soon after the apology, my beloved pickup truck was returned to me, its presence in my driveway feeling like a victory not just for myself, but for all veterans who had faced similar indignities. As I stood there, looking at it parked in its rightful place once more, I felt immense gratitude for the support that had poured in from friends and neighbors alike. It was more than just a vehicle. It had become a symbol of resilience and community strength. But the repercussions for the HOA didn't stop there. The pressure from outraged residents culminated in a swift reevaluation of board leadership. Several members responsible for the towing incident were voted out in disgrace during an emergency meeting that drew residents from across the neighborhood. The mood was electric as people took to the floor to voice their concerns and demand accountability for actions taken against veterans and fellow neighbors. As new board members were elected, individuals committed to transparency and community engagement, a palpable sense of hope began to fill the air. There was a collective understanding that changes were necessary to rebuild trust within our neighborhood. The old guard's rigid adherence to aesthetics over humanity had been challenged, and now there was an opportunity to create an inclusive environment where individuality and service were celebrated. In addition to these significant changes within the HOA structure, I received an unexpected surprise from a local business, a brand new truck donated in support of my journey. This gesture further exemplified how communities could come together to uplift one another during difficult times. As I reflected on these outcomes, I realized my fight was about more than reclaiming my truck or standing up against petty regulations. It had ignited a movement advocating for respect and recognition of all individuals, especially veterans. I felt optimistic about our future as we embarked on this journey together, a community no longer divided by superficial standards, but united by shared values of dignity and appreciation for one another's contributions. In the wake of the public apology from the Homeowners Association and the subsequent return of my truck, something extraordinary happened that further underscored the power of community support. A local business owner who had been following my story closely decided to take action that truly exemplified solidarity and generosity. One afternoon, I received a call from a local truck dealership, where I had often gone to admire the latest models. The owner, a veteran himself, expressed his admiration for my service and the challenges I had faced. He was deeply moved by how my community had come together to support me in my fight against the HOA. With great enthusiasm, he offered to donate a brand new truck in recognition of my military service, a gesture that left me speechless. When I finally saw the truck, it felt like a dream. The shiny exterior gleamed in the sunlight, and it stood as a testament not only to my journey but to the strength and kindness of those around me. As I sat in the driver's seat, I couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude for a community that had rallied behind me in my time of need. This new vehicle represented more than just transportation. It symbolized a profound shift in our neighborhood's values, an embrace of respect and appreciation for all who serve. The news of the donation quickly spread through social media, igniting yet another wave of support from residents. People began stopping by to express their congratulations and admiration for both the new truck and the community's response to injustice. Many shared their thoughts on how this moment represented not just a personal victory for me, but also a collective triumph for all veterans who have felt marginalized or disrespected. The overarching theme emerged. Our community was evolving into one that prioritized compassion over conformity. Conversations at local gatherings shifted from complaints about aesthetics to discussions about supporting one another as individuals with unique stories and sacrifices. This sense of camaraderie infused our town with renewed energy and passion. I was also invited to speak at various local events where I could share my journey, not only about reclaiming my truck, but also about advocating for veterans' rights and dignity. Each interaction allowed me to connect with others who shared their own experiences and hardships, reinforcing our collective resolve to create a more inclusive environment. As I drove my new truck through the streets, I felt a deep sense of connection to every member of my community. This was not just about celebrating a new vehicle. It was about embodying the spirit of solidarity that had emerged through adversity. We realized that standing up for one another is what truly makes a community strong. In this moment, I knew our neighborhood was on the path to becoming a place where respect for service members was woven into its fabric, a space where individuality was cherished and everyone could feel valued. The tangible support I received through this generous donation served as a reminder that while challenges may arise, they often pave the way for growth, unity, and lasting change. As I reflect on the journey that unfolded after my truck was towed, it becomes evident how a single struggle against petty bureaucracy can lead to profound change within a community. What began as a personal affront quickly transformed into a larger movement, igniting dialogue and reshaping attitudes toward veterans and their sacrifices. My experience served as a catalyst, drawing attention not only to my plight, but also to the underlying issues faced by many service members upon returning home. The power of public opinion cannot be overstated. It acts as a collective voice that can challenge injustice and demand accountability. When I chose to share my story, I had no idea it would resonate so deeply with others who had felt marginalized or overlooked. The outpouring of support revealed that many in our community shared similar frustrations with the Homeowners Association's rigid enforcement of rules that prioritized conformity over compassion. This shared sentiment sparked an awakening. Residents began to question whether their voices had been silenced for too long. As people rallied around the cause, the HOA found themselves under immense scrutiny. Their actions were laid bare before the public, leading to widespread outrage that ultimately prompted them to reconsider their approach to governance. The community's response served as a testament to the strength of collective action, illustrating how united voices could affect change, even against entrenched authority figures. With each passing day, more residents recognized that standing up for one person meant standing up for everyone's dignity and rights. The transformation of attitudes within our neighborhood was palpable. Conversations shifted from mere complaints about aesthetics to meaningful discussions about what it means to honor those who have served in the military. The newfound respect for veterans grew stronger as they became central figures in community conversations, not just symbols of sacrifice, but also as individuals deserving of acknowledgement and appreciation. Moreover, the generous donation of a new truck served as a powerful reminder that kindness often emerges from adversity. This act of solidarity not only restored my faith in community values, but also encouraged others to engage in acts of support for one another. It highlighted the importance of lifting each other up during difficult times, fostering a culture where compassion prevails over judgment. As I drove through our neighborhood in my new truck, I felt a profound sense of connection to my fellow residents, a bond forged through shared experiences and mutual respect. This entire journey reaffirmed my belief that meaningful change is possible when individuals unite for a common purpose. In conclusion, my struggle against an unjust decision by the HOA unveiled the incredible potential for transformation within a community. It illuminated the importance of valuing individuality, celebrating service, and embracing diversity in all its forms. As we move forward together, I am filled with hope that this momentum will continue to inspire positive change, ensuring that every member of our community feels valued and respected. The power of public opinion has shown us all that standing together can lead to lasting impact, and that is a victory worth celebrating.